Yeah, here you go. This is the book you want.
All right, I think we may be a minute before 10 o'clock. Good morning to everybody. We're glad that you're here. We're looking at Daniel in the Lion's Den today. Favorite Daniel stories. I remember when my grandmother lived with us. My mother's mother, Ruby Abernathy, lived with us. I guess she probably lived with all of her children at one time or another, so that she could watch the kids or be there when they got off the bus or came home from school. But my mom set her up. We actually became, when we built our first house in Flint, we became quite uppity, I guess. We had a guest room. We were not allowed to go in the guest room. Ultimately, my goals, nobody knew, but my ultimate goals were to take over the guest room so I could move out and not have to sleep in the same room with my little brother. But it became Little Mama's room for a long time. I guess it seemed like a very, very long time, but she probably didn't live with us all that long. But she always read from the Bible to us or told us a Bible story every night. And often, I know I liked Jonah and the Whale and Daniel in the Lion's Den. I liked that. We had a family Bible that had that classic painting of Daniel standing in the lion's den with his hands kind of laced behind his back, and the lions standing before him looked like they were being held at bay by something invisible. It's a very good story. But before we do that, let's look. Let's add Jessie Fredericks to our prayer list. She and her family, they're expecting a new baby, and she has had some problems in the past with pregnancy and delivery. So let's pray for Jessie throughout this whole term. I have come to have great respect. It seems, I guess, to be a natural thing for mothers to embrace motherhood, but after walking this world for a while, of course, not every woman is supposed to be a mother or wants to be a mother. Those who choose not to have children or raise children, that's perfectly fine. And that is no doubt or no question that that's God's will for some. I've seen many women, however, who have children that didn't seem to, in my mind, deserve to be mothers. Or then I saw people who really didn't want to be mothers at all, and they found out they were going to have a baby. It was not good news, it was a tragedy. There's all a mixture of that, I know, but none of that has diminished at all my respect and how I feel about my mom and my grandmother, the ladies in my life, the women, and then come to respect my own wife who bore our children. It's a very courageous thing. It requires a great deal of character and strength to bear it well. It happens quite naturally. It does come upon people whether they are prepared for it or bear it well at all. But I've seen so many cases and instances, and when someone perhaps has even had bad experience with childbearing, and then decide to try again, I guess, as they would say, or to have lost a pregnancy or to have had a difficult pregnancy, and then I know that I've joined a chorus of people who said, if men had babies, there would only be one. But it's
probably so.
very, very courageous for a woman who has gone through that. And ladies in our church.
But you know what? Once you have it, to me, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's worth it.
Ladies in our church frightened Terry to death with terrible stories of tearing sheets and screaming during labor. She did have a difficult labor with Carice. We just barely got to the hospital in time for Jonathan to just arrive, and so that was we probably should have been a little more afraid than we were. We didn't know how, because I think it was about 19 hours that Terry was in labor with Carice. But pray for Jessie. She is one of those brave souls. And in this strange time today, when I hear that someone is not only expecting a child, but they're going to keep the child, they're going to bear it to term and bring it into the world, I always praise them and I appreciate them. There are many in the world who choose not to do that. And so when I see someone who is daring the odds or have had great difficulty, I pray for them, and I have great respect for them. I spoke with Ned yesterday and enjoyed conversation with him. It looks like Betsy Stevenson is watching this morning. He and Betsy are recuperating. They've had some difficulties with getting Betsy's nourishment regulated, and it's more about what she was supposed to receive and how much, the quantity, relying upon deliveries and so forth. And Ned said they believe that she has a special formula that she's been required after the recent surgical procedure, and so she's not taking in anything. I mean, any kind of nourishment other than this liquid. She has been taking or drinking the liquid sustenance, like Ensure and things of that nature. But this is very special, what she's taking now, and it's about 1,400 calories per day. And but she and Ned do not get out very much, do not go to the pharmacy, perhaps the doctor, and to the grocery store. And but they are tuned in this morning. Keep praying for Betsy and continue to pray for Ned as well as they care for each other. Always keep Henry and Linda Crow in your prayers. They are staying separate and have had health problems. They are at high risk. Always remember Donna Serta. Donna doesn't get out very much, but from time to time we're able to see her. Pray for Donna and her family. I always pray for the Fredericks family and for Joanne's family, Clayton and his bunch there, and grandchildren, great-grandchildren among the two of them. Pray for Ann Sanders. Ann is in the area, but she is staying separate. There are many others of our congregation. I received a text yesterday that Danny and Terry Ward will be speaking. Danny will be speaking today in Double Springs, I think Terry said. We have a guest speaker coming. Hopefully, I hope that Ed will be able to bring his wife Merle. Ed and Merle Higdon have been our friends for many years, and he is with the Gideon's organization, so he's going to be sharing with us a report about the Gideon's ministry of spreading the Bible. Going back through my mind and my previous lists,
Liz Bain's family.
I haven't heard anything new. Usually on Friday nights we kind of get an update. That's when we go out to eat. But continue to pray for Liz's sisters and her brother-in-law, Helen and Jerry Wynn. Thank you for asking. And Ina. They are still all taking treatments and trying to do well. We've had some who have been sick and some hospitalized. But if I overlook someone, forget to pray for someone who should be on our list, I always keep Evelyn Garrison on our prayer list, and she's one of our long-distance members. And all right.
And can't remember her name. You put it on the one call yesterday, the woman that came
Yes,
to
Miss
sing.
Linda Sue Brown. Thank you for. I knew there was something on my mind, and that's why one of the main reasons I like to do prayer requests. Barbara, is that people help remind me. Linda Sue is Brown has sung here for us many times, and we just heard just this week that she is very, very sick, and her daughters are taking care of her at home, but she is very, very ill. Also, a couple of the ladies who visited with us during our winter revival about a year and a half or 2 years ago from Walden Chapel, Joanne Linderman and Joyce Walker, are having some health issues. They were very precious people. They and their husbands, very faithful members at Walden Chapel and indispensable workers for the Lord. We enjoyed doing musicals with them, Vacation Bible School. I've very seldom seen any small church do better at doing Vacation Bible School and doing their different church musicals. In their musical, we've served at churches where there were children's choirs or youth choirs or even adult choirs that did different cantatas or musicals. But at Walden Chapel, everybody in the church is called upon to be a part. So you kind of say your lines and you go back and sit in the congregation. And they take great care to take pieces and parts of different musicals that are available and craft them into something that's especially for the church. So pray for those people. Let me lead us in prayer. I'm looking down and seeing several who have joined us today by popping in at home. It's always good to see your names there, but leave us a note if you get a chance and just say hello and let us know how you and your family are doing. I see Brian Evans. Looks like he's watching from Arkansas. I hope Brian and his family are doing well. Very fond memories of them. We saw Jeff and Marilyn Melson at the funeral last Saturday, and family, dear member of our family, passed away. There are others who are tuning in. Others I can see here. I can only see 2 or 3 names at a time as they pop up here. So if you're watching and I didn't mention your name, please forgive me. Let me lead us in prayer and we'll look at this passage in Daniel. Lord, thank you for the privilege of praying. Lord, I hope that my view of prayer and praying is correct and it's something that it pleases you. I know that it's not a presentation of a wish list. I know that, yes, there is an answer for every question in your mind, but it's not important that we know everything that there is to know in order to be able to trust you and believe in you. Help us to understand the nature of faith. You're not just requiring us to be blind and without reason to follow you. But Lord, you are asking us to trust in things that we cannot see and hope to experience things we've never experienced before. These people we've mentioned by name, give them courage and strength, physical strength and spiritual strength to embrace your will for their lives, to the praise of your name and to your glory. For we ask it in your name. Amen. We have a similar question today as we've answered before. We're going to take a little bit of a side track here in a minute, but we looked in recent weeks at where was Daniel when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were in the fiery furnace.
There was 4 people in the fire though.
Yeah, one of them looked like the Son of God.
Yep.
Where was Daniel? And so we had a little bit of fun with that, and I guess that's maybe it. Sometimes it's not that we have a burning question or that it's something that makes or breaks our faith, but it's our curiosity. It's our in modern times with technology and information, knowledge has a different place in our life than it ever did. My forefathers were farmers. They didn't have a great ecological understanding of farming or seed germination or, a lot of what they believed was probably superstition. See a robin and if spring's going to be here, or the phase of the moon might have something to do when to plant seeds, when Easter came, and Good Friday, and those kind of things. perhaps even those based upon science or someone's scientific research and became myth or legend that were followed and to great success often. But the question today, we're going to look at Daniel in the lion's den. So here's the question. Where were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego when Daniel was in the trouble with the lion's den? Why didn't they step up and say, hey, I don't know, So we're going to look at that just a little bit. And I'm going to bail on that just a little bit. I'm going to backtrack just a little bit because I have a nature. I often found great appeal in the field of apologetics, and there are many apologists today, and we think of an apology as saying I'm sorry, but the classical meaning of the word apology is like a defense, defending something, explaining something, or having a rational explanation for something that seems to challenge our faith.
Maybe it was because it was a setup. They set him up, and then after was it the king or had made the decree, he had to stick.
They couldn't get out of it, yeah, and so this was not the decree was kingdom wide, but it really was zeroed in on. They really just wanted to catch one person, and they were not interested in. And so at any rate, Daniel was standing alone, but I think that's the best explanation. There is that this was specific. It was particular. It was focused. And when you're telling a story like this, the three Hebrew children, Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael, may very well have requested audience with the king and said, we really like to save Daniel. They may have even come to Daniel and said, we'll die for you. We'll die with you. We'll go in the lion's den with you. And Daniel may have said, no, I got this. Me and the Lord's got this. So I think there's probably hundreds of things that maybe were not told in the story. So let me hit one other thing and then I'm going to hit that again, and with some, as I said, a differing approach. Our lesson kind of made reference to, and Daniel chapter 5 is where I want to start. Remember, we studied last, the point or the purpose of last Sunday's message was Nebuchadnezzar lost his mind. That may happen to any of us at any time, to the dementia or Alzheimer's disease or other mental incapacities are not new. I remember here when I was a little boy about someone who had hardening of the arteries. Did you ever hear that? He's got his arteries are hard. And I guess because of plaque and so forth, that can cause dementia or mental problems. Nebuchadnezzar went off on a tear. He became almost like the Bible describes it like a beast. It's like an animal. We don't know how long, but he was not king during that time, and it does not spell it out as clearly as it might have, I think. I'm say that thing when I'm studying through, but in chapter 5 we meet someone called Belshazzar. Belshazzar. He is described as the king's son. Now, back in ancient times, any male who was a member of your family could be called your son. Could be your nephew, grandson, your cousin. The word son doesn't just mean he's your little boy that you had. It meant family member. That's all that it means. It just means male family member. Or a father. It also was male family member. They didn't have paternity tests. They didn't know who was the father of who, and they had all of these kings not only had multiple wives, but they had concubines. They were kind of like I don't know what they were kind of like, mistresses, I guess, maids and mistresses. They served in many ways. But it appears that Belshazzar, who was in some way or another the son of King Nebuchadnezzar, ruled while Nebuchadnezzar was crazy. People I still use a lot of older words. Crazy is one of them. Now my granddaughters won't let me say crazy or stupid, or shut up. They don't. Our niece has a little girl. They're stationed in Guam right now, and they have a little girl. She's just a sweet little girl. And somebody, for a present, got her a little baby that cries. And they were recently home for some of the holidays, and she had that thing with her, and it started crying. And Aaliyah is very small, but she whacked that thing and said, "Shut up, baby." "Shut up, baby." I thought, oh man. Now Terry's mother was telling that. We didn't actually hear the "shut up, baby," and the baby did shut up too. So I thought, well, that's some good parenting skills, I guess, from the past. Yes, we can say mentally incapacitated, mentally challenged, but Nebuchadnezzar went crazy for just a little while. I said he was eating grass. That's pretty crazy.
That would be crazy.
Now,
Well,
first,
we eat green stuff.
that's right. That's right. Now, when I first look at this story, the first thing is his name is Belshazzar. Now, any kind of name like that, any kind of Middle Eastern or Canaanite name like that, it's based on the reference to the word Baal or Baal. That's the Canaanite, one of the Canaanite gods. Now anything ending in El, like Bethel or Daniel, has the word God in it. Our God, Yah or Jehovah, is like Jeremiah, and so we name children after our gods. Maybe I'm not as culturally diverse as I need to be, but I still get a lot of telephone calls through my job during the week where I have to talk to someone named Jesus, and I say, well, you got to give Jesus a call, you know. And so I could, you know, probably the most common female name in the Catholic world is the name Maria, you know, to Mary or Maria or Mariah, and I don't have, but you know, to call your son Jesus is. I don't disagree with it. I don't disapprove of it. That's just really uncomfortable to me. I only think of one Jesus. But anyway, that's no problem. I speak to him with great respect, and that it is Jesus. Oh, Belshazzar. Daniel's Babylonian name was Belteshazzar. Just got a little T-E in there in the middle. Belshazzar, Belteshazzar. They may have grown up together in the palace. I think they were named. They're named very similarly. They may not have been associated with each other in any way. But Daniel was very high up. He was. Belshazzar divided the deployment of his kingdom into 3 sections, and he put Daniel over the one of them. And ultimately, Daniel's group was just doing, his overseership was doing so much better that he was really kind of running the whole show. And that's what these other guys were after. Well, they didn't want that. They didn't want Daniel running the entire kingdom, and so that's why they attacked him. But this is a story. I began many, many years ago preaching on this passage when I used to preach a lot of revivals as a young preacher. And this is the story about the writing on the wall. You familiar with that story? Belshazzar was probably in all practical purposes, the regent. He was the royal regent. He was serving as king while Nebuchadnezzar was crazy. And that's an indication they thought he would get better. Or maybe he was improving. Maybe he started improving, and they said, well, he'll be back. And it was out of respect to him that they appointed a regent, or allowed Belshazzar to serve. Now they had a big celebration, big party, a big feast. And during this time, Belshazzar, he was already pretty well intoxicated, I guess, and he thought, well, when when we went down into Israel and we kidnapped all of these Israelite people to be our slaves, and we destroyed their temple, we took away all of the treasures of the temple. There were all different kinds of accoutrements that we see. You can go back and read the book of Exodus, and there were goblets and plates and spoons and forks and instruments for incense, things that they used during the process of worshiping at the tabernacle and the temple. Well, all of these were taken away, and they were in the Babylonian treasury. So Belshazzar said, hey, I tell you what, go and get all of those serving instruments and utensils and bring them here to the party, and we'll eat and drink out of them. And they did. It's always been common for people to disrespect other people's beliefs, to speak ill of their gods. If people have no regard for you as a Christian, or they have no respect for the God that you worship, or Jesus, you know, it's nothing new, and don't take it personally. Don't let it even, well, I can't say don't let it make you angry. Just maybe there's a righteous indignation that's deserved there. But it's the kind of nonsense that I hope that you'll never, I hope that you'll always respect people who do not believe, or people who believe in a different way. Do not speak with disrespect. I believe that we should be able to speak with each other and disagree. We should be able to say, I believe this is right and this is wrong. We should be able to, on an intellectual or a theological level, discuss and debate what we believe or what others believe, but there's never any reason for being disrespectful. Well, they were drinking their wines and all their different drinks out of the instruments that had previously been used in the worship of God by the Hebrew people. During that time, a hand appeared up on the wall, just a hand. That's a little strange. And it began to write, it began to make some writing on the wall. And it wrote the words, Mene, Mene, M-E-N-E, Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin. And it just vanished. Well, it says that Belshazzar turned as white as a sheet. He went pale. All the blood ran out of his face. And it says his knees knocked together. He just became a mess. It scared him to death. So he brought in all the Chaldean and Babylonian wise men, all of the scientists, and if you think, don't think that in this modern day that we turn to science for all of our answers. We've been doing that since the beginning of time. If we don't want God's answer, then we look and see if science will explain it. Now that doesn't mean that science is wrong or that science is not a good thing to explore. But when God does something, it's a God answer that you're looking for. And sometimes there are just God answers in the world. You're not going to find scientific answers for a God question. Well, they had no idea. They couldn't translate it. They couldn't interpret it. They had no idea what it meant. There may have been someone among them. Now, these are not, this is not an unknown language. This is Chaldean. And it doesn't mean, there's a great possibility that they actually knew what the words meant. They knew what the words were. They could translate it. But they didn't want to tell the king what it said. And they said they didn't know. Well, the queen came in. The queen's not crazy. But the queen came in. It's indicated that this was the queen who bore the crown as Nebuchadnezzar's wife. Said, when my husband wasn't crazy, as any lady said, when my husband wasn't crazy, there was a man in our kingdom who was a teller of dreams, and he was a wise man, and he was a servant of the living God. If you bring him in, he'll, and she was talking about Daniel. She brought Daniel in, and Daniel said, well, this is what it means. You've been weighed in the balances, and you've been found wanting. Tonight, your soul is going to be required of you. This is the end of your life. And stuck to the king. Well, it seemed to please him. That, it didn't surprise him, and it doesn't really say if he believed it or not. But that night, the Medes invaded Darius, and the Medes invaded, and they took over the Babylonian kingdom. And Belshazzar died that night. He was killed. My sermon many years ago was the writing on the wall, and the writing in the sand, and the writing in the books. And so there's three different places. The writing in the sand is when Jesus was writing there, when the woman was taken in adultery. It says he stooped down and began to just write on the ground in the dirt. And then there's, it says at the great judgment day at the end of time that they brought forth and looked at the writings in the books, which are really speaking symbolically of our record of our lives. Well, that's a powerful story, and of the judgment of God. And we see here not only Nebuchadnezzar was judged for his pride, Belteshazzar was judged for his disrespect and his callous treatment of the people of God and also the holy things of God. Well, let's look at Daniel and Lion's Den. We just got that's kind of introductory or foundational. As I said, I've used to enjoy arguing about things. I used to, when I became a Christian, the very first people that I tried to share my faith with, I had no idea in the world that they were religious people. And then when I began sharing my faith, I had been friends with this young man and his family for a long time. Never had any idea that they attended church or believed in God or anything. But when I began talking, I just newly discovered my faith. I just became a Christian. They took it upon themselves to correct me of all my wrong beliefs. I thought, this is odd. Y'all never seem to care anything at all. I was just 14 years old, but I wound up at the end of their enthusiasm, I guess you might say. So I felt compelled to double down, and so I guess you could say I became a really stringent student of the Word of God. First of all, I loved the Word of God, but then I felt like I needed to know it so that I could. I didn't know there were any enemies of the faith, and then I began to think, that we as Christians, we're our own worst enemy. We back in the 1970s, there were not any more than usual people who attacked Christianity or seemed to be on a warpath with Christianity. But it seems like there were lots of Christians who were embattled with each other. And I took up the sword for defending my faith. Well, lost interest with that. Many years ago, I still study the Word of God, and I see it as God's truth. But I take a different tack now. Let's go back then with some of these questions. First of all, where was Daniel when the three Hebrew children were being executed or attempted at execution? Well, the first answer to that question is the Bible doesn't say. That's the first answer. The second answer is we don't know. And the reason we don't know is because the Bible doesn't say. Now, is it enjoyable? Is it entertaining? Is it even instructive to exercise oneself in thinking of using your spiritual imagination to imagine and speculate? There's nothing wrong with that at all. But yet, to use it as a foundation for any kind of disagreement is not worthwhile. It's not, doesn't produce anything, in my opinion. Now, that's just my opinion. So I don't argue with it. When someone comes and says, I heard that you're this kind of a believer, or that you believe in this, I have no interest at all. And that's not entertaining to me anymore. I don't think it's instructive for me, and it's not beneficial. I don't think you're accomplishing anything. Again, I may be wrong on that, and someone may disagree with me. But I can say with absolute certainty that in the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the fiery furnace, Daniel is not mentioned at all. I can say that. I know that's the truth. So where was Daniel? The Bible doesn't say. So I believe this is one of those places that, yes, we talked about theories, and I shared with you my favorite theory, and one that I think is possible, and yet the first, but perhaps the second best answer is we don't know. Now, here in chapter 6, look at verse 1 of chapter 6. It pleased Darius, now Darius is the new Median king, to set over the kingdom 120 princes, which should be over the whole kingdom, and over these 3 presidents, of whom Daniel was the first, that the princes might give accounts unto them, and the king should have no damage. Okay, very smart man, dividing things up. There are always people smarter than I am. There are always people smarter than you. So if you've got these people in your life, depend on them, call upon them, see if there are people who will help you with this. There may be some things you're very smart about. Because I talk to scientists every day, and I tell you, more often than I can imagine, a scientist I'll call them or they'll call me and they'll say, the camera on my computer's not working. I turn it on, the little light comes on, and I click the button, and the camera program comes up, but there's no image on it, it's just dark. And I say, there's a little slide right up there at the top. If you'll take your finger and if you'll slide that little window open, they say, oh, look at there's me. And then I have to back out of that call without using the word dummy. You got to be really careful. And you can't say, you're a dummy. I don't remember you doing rocket fuel or something like that. Of course, there are things that they know how to do that I have no notion about, no idea. There's often occasions where I help them install software on their computer. I don't even know how to use the software. I don't even know what it is. And they say, how do you do this? I have no idea, sir. You're just going to have to figure that out on your own. I've never seen that before in my life. I can install it, but I'm unfamiliar with it. I've never been trained on that. Well, then this Daniel in verse 3 was preferred above all the presidents and princes because an excellent spirit was in him, and the king thought to set him over the whole realm. And it's here, it certainly is associated with the Spirit of God with him. When it says he had an excellent spirit, it's talking about his attitude. It's really just talking about the way he approached things, the way he saw things, his personality. He was just a pleasant person, and so he wound up being over the whole realm. Then the presidents and princes sought to find occasion against Daniel concerning the kingdom, but they could find none occasion nor fault. When they were trying to condemn Jesus, they couldn't find any fault in it. Even Pilate said, "Oh, can't see any fault. He might be crazy. I don't believe he's the Messiah." But they persisted. It says that they even brought false witnesses against Jesus. I guess that's something maybe unreasonably so. If anyone has an axe to grind with me, I fear often that they might, people can just say anything they want to about you. They can accuse you of anything, and sometimes just the mere accusation. When someone comes to me about a church member or family member and say, "Did you hear this?" I either tell them, I say, "Yes, I did hear that," or "I didn't hear it, but I don't believe everything I hear." And my my first reaction is not to believe bad things about you. If someone were to tell me something bad about you, maybe it's true, but my first reaction is not to believe it. I have already, I learned that from being a parent. If someone said my children did something wrong, I didn't believe that. I wanted to go find out from my son and daughter. Now, if my son or my daughter told me I did not do that, I had a tendency to believe them. Now, have my children always told the truth? No, and neither have I. But I said, no, I'll tell them. And there have been times that I've spoken with friends and people that I've pastored, and I've said, tell me the truth. They've told me what they say the truth is. And I say, okay, I don't have any reason to believe this bad thing about you. And you tell me that it's not the truth. And so until I am convinced otherwise, I'm going to make a choice to believe in you, even though you may or may not be guilty. You know that the Bible tells us that when we are presented before God, we're going to be presented as if we are perfect. And I know that I'm not perfect. Does that mean that Jesus is going to lie? No, he's just going to tell all the good things and leave all the bad things out. So here we see in the story of Daniel, Darius, and here is a phrase that we see in other texts, other ancient texts, the law of the Medes and the Persians. You may, in my lifetime, I've heard it before. The law of the Medes and the Persians. It's mentioned, it is referred to twice here. And what that means today, in modern times, is something that cannot be changed. We say, all right, we're going to set this up, and as far as we're concerned, it's the law of the Medes and the Persians. In other words, this is something that is irrevocable. It cannot be changed, cannot be overturned. There are no exceptions. Well, that's what it meant then, too. The law of the Medes and the Persians, and this is what they were using against King Darius. Now, he had a pride problem, too, and he had, I think he learned something from this, but they said, you can't pray to any other god except the God that you pray to.
There is only one God.
That's right. So, they were after Daniel, though, and they knew that Daniel, it was a setup. It was a trap. And the thing about it is that these people came to the king then. He realized when they came, and it says that Daniel went to where he stayed, to his home, and opened up the windows, and he prayed 3 times a day. Now, he wasn't doing that to disobey the new law. You know why he did that? Because he did it every day. He always did it. He wasn't really protesting. He wasn't, and that's the way a lot of people are these days. You know why I don't march in marches? Because I don't march about things. That may be a very good way to protest, to make your disagreement known. But I have lots of other ways. When I don't like something, I pray. I ask God to change it. Now, there are some things that I feel very strongly about. I feel very strongly about the abortion issue. But I've never marched in a parade or in a Right to Life march. I've never carried a placard or signed a petition. But I pray about that every day.
I do too. Even though I don't know the women.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know their circumstances. I don't know their situation. And God does. And I pray for God to find a way to change things. Daniel was not being egregious. He was not protesting. He just prayed every day. So a lot of times people do things out of anger or out of protest. And, out of maliciousness, sometimes they kind of want to grab these celebrities or these politicians and say, hey, where were you 10 years ago when this was going on and it was worse? Or How come all of a sudden you don't like this? You know, why is it that you've lived your whole life and all of a sudden maybe you've made hundreds of movies about using guns and shooting and killing people, and now you're against guns? What? Why all of a sudden? Why have you changed? Have you had like a eye-opening experience? Maybe you have. Well, Daniel was not mocking the king. He was not deliberately disobeying a law. Is there a place for disobedience of the laws of men? Yes, there is. But Daniel, this was not his intent. He was just doing what he did every day, and that's what they were counting on. Let me say this, and we're about done. If the only way somebody can get you is in the good things that you do, then okay, that's fine. They know you're going to slip up. They know that you're going to do this. They know that they can get you because you do this good thing, or you're this kind of good person. They know that you're going to choose or make this selection, and so they got you. Okay. They can't pin anything bad on you, so they're going to pin the good on you. Wear it with pride. Well, they came in, dragged Daniel in, and Darius hated him. He said, oh no. He realized that this didn't have anything to do with praying to God or which God you prayed to or how religious you were. It didn't have anything at all to do with obeying the law or passing good laws or bad laws. He knew that what it was about was jealousy. And I see a lot of laws in our country today and a lot of leaders. I see a lot of leadership, and I hear a lot of proclamations that they don't have anything at all to do with what they're hollering about. They'd already said they were going to throw them into a den of lions. Why anybody has a den of lions, I don't know. What we need around here is a den of lions and a den of bears too. You don't want the bears to feel left out. Who knows? Evidently it was the kind of thing that you kind of kept around so you could throw your enemies into or threaten them with. Darius came to Daniel and he said, I passed the law of the Medes and the Persians. No way out. And Daniel said, that's fine. It's okay. Do what you got to do, king. He didn't tell the king what an idiot he was. I think the king pretty much felt like an idiot. So they threw him into the lion's den. Just put him in there. And it says he sealed the tomb because he didn't want anybody to get in there and kill Daniel. Kind of thought the lions would take care of that. It says they sealed it and put his signet ring on it. In other words, it's just like they sealed Jesus' tomb. Don't want anybody messing with this. And he knew that I'm closing this and I'm going to be the only person who can open it. He could tell someone had tampered with it. His plan was that just as soon as the rooster crowed in the morning, he's going to jump out of bed. And he did. I believe he came down to the dungeon in his pajamas. He had his soldiers break away the seal from the den, and they rolled the stone back. And Daniel was in there, and there were the lions, and they had not harmed him. He had cried out, Daniel, let me find that. I really like it. Verse 20. He came to the den, he cried with a lamentable voice unto Daniel. And the king spake and said to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God, is your God, whom thou servest continually, able to deliver thee from the lions? And Daniel said unto the king, O king, live forever. My God has sent his angel, and hath shut the lions' mouths. But they have not hurt me, for as much as before him innocency was found in me, and also before thee, O king, have I done no hurt. The king was exceedingly glad for him, and he commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no manner of hurt was found upon him, because he believed in his God. And the king commanded, and they brought the men who had accused Daniel, and they cast them into the den of lions, them, their children, and their wives. And the lions had the mastery of them, and brake all the bones in their pieces, before they ever hit the bottom of the den.
That's what I said. I said, God works in mysterious ways. He's got a reasons for everything he does. We don't understand it sometimes. We say, why, God? Why did you do this? Why didn't you do that?
Exactly.
That
Probably, if they had asked Daniel what to do with his enemies, he probably would not have chosen that end for them.
no.
He would not, especially the wives and the
Yeah, I
children.
never understood that. There's so many times in the Bible where the whole family.
Yeah, just, they evidently was wanting to cause an end to their line. I mean,
Yeah.
not just you, but their wives and their children may have been, there's a line in our lesson guide, or in my version, that says they may have been involved, or they may have encouraged it, or contributed to it, and I'm thinking, no, you can't do that. We can't find and say that's something in the Bible that we don't like and say, well, they probably deserved it. Well, they probably didn't. They probably didn't. I can't say, did these men deserve such a terrible death? I'd say, no. If I was standing there and said, what about you, guy from the future? You think, what do we think? I said, well, let's fire them, and they'll have to find other jobs. They're going to have to bear this. They're going to have to live with this the rest of their life. And, maybe we'll put them in prison or something. I don't know. Maybe I'll figure out something. But my goodness, they were so very barbaric back then and harsh. And I don't think Daniel felt gratified by this, or that he felt pleased with it. It's not anything that he instigated. But the king was very convinced in Daniel's goodness. And I think he became very, very convinced in these men's wickedness. And he just not only killed them, but they would never have any, their line would discontinue. There would not be any of their family anymore. He gathered them all up. And someone might say, well, no, they never did that again, or nobody ever did anything like that again. Yeah, that's a good way of putting a quietus on that. But here again, this person was he was just now beginning to learn about who the true God was, and he had a lot to show for it. But God did save Daniel. He rescued him. And there have been thousands and thousands and thousands of Christians over the years who've been thrown into lions' dens, who were destroyed, who died. They gave their life. They stood by their faith. Daniel was saved. God doesn't always save us from the lion's den. He did save Daniel. He can. If we're ever in the lion's den, God can save us. But we need to be willing to die. Just like Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego said. They said, "Oh, King, our God is able to save us if he wants to, but if not," he said, "we're still not going to bow down to your old idol." I have a great deal of respect for all of that. But let's carry on. We're just about to finish up. We're getting into the spooky part of the book of Daniel next. Thank y'all for joining in and being with us.